Diversity Among the Human Race and the Effort People Have Gone to Stop It by JasmineNijjar. The Japanese Internment, Example of a Hate Crime Induced by Race. On December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor, located in Hawaii, received a surprise military attack which was launched by the Japanese. At this time, Canada was home to many Japanese Canadians, but Canada betrayed each and every one of them when they were deemed spies. They were taken from their homes in 1942 after having their homes searched for spyware and other suspicious activity in December 1941. Women, children, men, and seniors, everyone was boarded onto crowded transportation with no food and water. The trains led them to Hastings Park, Vancouver, where they were faced with internment camps. The condition of the camps resembled those of a prison. The camps were made up of barns. They were very small, with some under 400 square feet, and they had to share these very small living areas with other families. Things such as staying warm and having privacy were merely just luxuries of the past. After months living in these horrible conditions, they were shipped off in trains. These trains led men to work on roads, where they were paid little to no wage, and women to work in shanty towns. Many daughters, wives, never saw their husbands or fathers again. Japanese people were being deported back to Japan, and those who weren't deported had little options left. Many ended up moving to Toronto, where they became farmers. It wasn't until 1988, 40 years later, that the government offered $21,000 to each person who had been subjected to the Japanese internment camps in compensation. The Holocaust, arguably one of the most heinous and repugnant events in world history. Throughout history, the Jewish people have always been subjected to hate and discrimination. However, it wasn't until January 30th of 1933, when Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, that the Jewish people went through one of the most tormenting experiences anyone could ever go through. Just like the Japanese Canadians, all Jewish people, homosexuals, and mentally ill were sent away to concentration camps on crowded transportation with no food and water. Upon arrival, men and women were separated, had their heads shaved, and were forced into prisoner clothing. The goal was to eliminate every single Jew. What went on inside of these concentration camps was more terrifying than some people's worst nightmares. Nobody was spared, not women, babies, children, seniors, no one. The most common method of mass murder was the gas chamber, where prisoners were forced into a chamber where they died after inhaling poisonous gas. Prisoners were also starved to death, shot, or just died simply due to disease or malnutrition. Over 6 million Jewish people were killed during the Holocaust, and that does not count the amount of homosexuals or mentally ill that were killed. One of the most sharpest memories of survivors was the music that was played when the people were forced into gas chambers. The Nazis played very cheerful and uplifting music to mask the screams and cries of the people who were dying. When World War II ended and the Holocaust came to a close, survivors were simply traumatized and scared. They could not just go back to the way that things used to be in their normal homes and with normal lives, considering what they had been through. To make matters worse, there was a massive Jewish hatred spreading across Europe. Most Jewish people ended up living the rest of their lives in refugee camps. No one went back to normal after going through both such an emotionally and physically traumatizing experience. The countries that sent Jewish people to concentration camps apologized, and Germany paid out billions to Jewish survivors. However, is this really enough to cancel out what they have been through? Comparison between the Japanese internment and the Holocaust. In the Japanese internment, very, very few Japanese people were killed, as this was not the point. However, in the Holocaust, over 6 million Jewish people were killed, as well as the homosexuals, gypsies, and mentally ill that were killed. The Japanese internment started in March of 1942, while the Holocaust began in January 30th of 1933. The Japanese internment was formed to keep Canada safe from the so-called Japanese spies, while the Holocaust was started to exterminate all Jewish people from planet Earth. The Japanese internment resembled a prison, in the sense that no one was killed, rather people were just held against their will, while the Holocaust was basically a death camp, as the point was to kill. The Japanese internment people were treated like criminals, while the people of the Holocaust were treated worse than garbage. The Japanese internment was an unfortunate event that betrayed Japanese Canadians, many of which had parents or grandparents that were first-generation Canadians, while the Holocaust was considerably one of the worst events to happen in human history. A snapshot into why people discriminate. The Japanese internment and the Holocaust were just two examples of the many, many ways that people have been discriminated against in world history. Some other examples of discrimination include when the white people enslaved the blacks, the numerous hate crimes directed at homosexuals, and the mistreatment of First Nations. People can feel threatened by what they don't know, such as when someone has a different skin color as them, a different belief, a different religion, and this can make them act out. Discrimination is often based on biased views towards a certain group and does not by any means mean that that person being discriminated against is a criminal. The Japanese and the Jews were not criminals, but rather they were just victims of hate crimes and discrimination. Throughout history, there have been many people who are making efforts to stop discrimination and rather allow human rights to everyone. Some of these historical figures include Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King. These efforts were not to go in vain, as many, many people work today to allow diversity and human rights to everyone. It is hopeful that someday discrimination can just be a thing of the past, and humans will never ever repeat the same mistakes they have made in history, such as the Holocaust and the Japanese internment.